Good afternoon, colleagues, governors, board, friends, students, everybody here. My name is Nick Alchin. I'm the head of college, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Kishore Mahbubani speaker series. The idea from these speaker series is to engage with and hear from leading speakers from Singapore and around the region. And under the theme of inform, innovate, and inspire, we're seeking to understand how the ambitions of our mission to educate for peace and a sustainable future can be realized in social spaces and in personal spaces. And for today's guest speaker, the convergence between the personal and the social is absolutely clear. Many of you will know Corinna Lim from her time across Singapore. Corinna Lim joined AWARE, the Association of Women for Action and Research, as a member and volunteer in 1992. As an NUS graduate, she was at the time working as a lawyer, where she rose to be a partner in law firms such as Allen and Gledhill and Cato Wong and Partners. Corinna's trajectory broadened when, in recognition of her contributions to civil society and for work toward the advancements of women's rights, you're smiling, looking like you're blushing. So it's like when you're a public figure, you can do a lot of research on the web these days. She was awarded a Fulbright scholarship leading to a master's in public administration. That was from Columbia University in New York, and she's written that the focus on the public work, not just the private work, to quote, changed my career trajectory from lawyer to entrepreneur and ultimately to what I do today, a gender equality advocate. Since then, Corinna's had over 20 years of entrepreneurial experience as well, having been the co-founder and CEO of Busybody Technology, a .com company specializing in the legal industry, as well as having led the creation, development, and operation of Justice Online, which was the world's first web-based video conferencing facility between courts and the law firms. Corinna became executive director of AWARE in 2010, and since then has been responsible for a whole range of initiatives. AWARE has been very active right across the political spectrum and social spectrum in Singapore, including setting up the only specialized service in Singapore that exists to support sexual assault victims. She led AWARE teams to successfully advocate for the enactment of the Protection from Harassment Act, the repeal of the marital rape immunity, better access to housing for single parents, gender equality workplaces, and greater support for low-income families and caregivers of the elderly. She's made and continues to make a difference to the vulnerable in Singapore. What's perhaps especially noticeable about Corinna is the way that she's managed to engage so effectively with people who don't necessarily agree with her or might even disagree with her. I think it's fair to say that she seeks to change the system from within, to persuade, to build, to bring people with her, not to push past them. That's not just a stark contrast to some visions of strong leadership. It's a welcome reminder in these polarized times that change comes in different ways. And the important thing, the long game for social change, is not the quick win or the stunning soundbite, the great put down or the short-term victory that actually creates more enmity for the long term. The really hard, difficult work is the work of changing hearts and minds. That's where the long-term change comes. And that's why Corinna was recently recognized as a champion of quiet power, which has been defined as a force that brings about transformative shifts in the lives of ordinary people through strategic collaboration and concerted effort with like-minded individuals. And of course, the real sign of success is when you have a cause for which you can create like-minded individuals, even when perhaps they weren't like-minded at the start, through the moral stature and your persuasion and your understanding of how to bring people with you. So our guest today, therefore, is one for whom the theme of inform, innovate, and inspire could have been written. Corinna's work has over the decades informed so many people across Singapore and social legislative directions, including, as I've said, so many ways of improving the lives of vulnerable groups. And it only takes a moment of research or talking to people who've worked with her over the years to realize the inspiration she has been for so many. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Corinna Lim.
Gone? Okay, thank you. Wow, blinding lights. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for that very kind and embarrassing introduction. I was actually going to bring you through, and I still will, the sort of the inside journey of that, very glowing CV that Nick just read out. I do want to start a little differently today, and I've never started this way before, so I'm going to try this out. I thought there would be more students, so I actually designed this for more students, but everyone can do this, okay? And I hope you will do this with me. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, because we've all had a long day, and to take 3 deep breaths. And with the first breath, and with your nose and your nostrils, I've just come back from a 10-day silent retreat doing my breath work for 9 hours each day, so I'm really into this. But anyway, we're going to be doing deep breathing, 3 breaths, and the first breath, when you breathe in, you're just gonna, a greeting to yourself, hello, so I'm gonna say it for myself, hello Corinna, breathe out. Second breath, you're going to ask yourself, how are you feeling? And as you breathe out, just whatever word pops into your head. Curious, sleepy, excited. And in the third breath, I will lead that, right? So at that point, I will say what the prompt is going to be. So if you will do this with me, I'll be really grateful. So if you are comfortable, please close your eyes, okay? And take your first deep breath. Great. And just a greeting to yourself. Hello. Your name. Breathe out. Second deep breath with your eyes still closed. How are you feeling? Ask yourself that and breathe out. Whatever's come to your head. And the third breath, if you can all do this together with me, breathe in. And the prompt is change starts with me. Breathe out. Okay. So today's talk is about social change. And a lot of people ask, can you make social change in Singapore? Why do you need to make social change in Singapore? And how do you start? And I believe that at least the people in this room, you're probably interested in some kind of change. You're not wholly satisfied with the way society is, with the way the world is, with the conflicts, at all levels, right? Both war as well as social conflicts that we're facing. So change does start with me. I will start with my personal story. Next slide. Sham is my kind assistant who's helping me today. Next slide, please, Sham. You want me to click it? Okay. Okay, that's fine. I'm not sure whether you can see this. This is a life story exercise that I did a few years ago. It ends in 2019. And it's actually what Nick has said, okay? And the sort of the vertical axis is bad experience is the bottom of the axis, and the top is good experience, right? So I wanted to start the story, and I was basically a good student. I was also a competitive sportswoman. I played squash, I played tennis, I represented Singapore. I did very well in school. That's up till 22. And then I went to law school, and law school was not my preference, but my parents wanted me to do law. My twin sister was doing law, so anyway, I tagged along and I did law. Thankfully, I loved it. I love studying the law, and I think that if you are not sure what you want to do with life and you can't get into law school, do it, because to me, it's a wonderful discipline. Then I got into a very good law firm, it was probably the best job, sort of the best place that you could start. And I was totally miserable. So you can see my law firm experience, 23 to 33. The green line is very short because it was not a good experience. Not because of the law firm, but because of other things. Number one, I thought I was going to be fighting for justice. That was what law school was about. That was what case law was about. That was what, being a lawyer was about. But no, I didn't do that. I worked for bankers. I defended someone who was accused of insider trading. I tried to I sued, acting for the bank, a person who had built up his petrol station, acting for oil major, a petrol station for many years, and the oil major was now taking it back. It was his livelihood. So it was not what I imagined being a lawyer would be like. That was the main reason. But the second reason, just as important, was that I didn't see people who looked like me, and which meant I didn't see any gay people in my law firm. There were none. And for me, and in those days, there was no LGBT group. No one talked about this. I just knew it was something that you had to keep in the closet. So it was hard when there was no one else in the closet, okay? So I did feel like I should, migrate. That's the get out of Singapore, find greener pastures. I love nature. There was not that much in Singapore, and I really wanted to be in a place where I was accepted. So that was my early law firm experience. And, in this journey, one thing that I have loads of is luck. So as luck would have it, there was a colleague who had become pregnant and said, I do free legal clinics in Queenstown Community Center, and now I have to give it up. Will you be interested to take my place? And I'm like, oh yes. And in those days, now there's a lot of pro bono law, legal counseling opportunities. But in those days, there was only one group, the Singapore Association of Women Lawyers, who ran pro bono legal clinics, and they had like 12 centers, and they were not growing. If no one was giving up their center, you could not have this place. So I said yes, and I did it. I was not a family lawyer. All the cases were about family law, but I just picked it up. And it changed my life, right? So this one door that opened, and it meant that now, every month, on a Thursday evening, I would go to Queenstown Legal Community Center, unlock the door, sit in a room. There would be about 8 women who would come in. They took their turns, half an hour each. So after a long day's work, I would do this for about 4 hours. Right? And finally, my legal skills were being put to good use to service society, to make the world, for me, a slightly better place. Because when the women walked out after the half an hour, I saw hope in their eyes. I saw that just that little piece of advice when I said, okay, this is your situation, these are your options, these are some possible steps. What do you think you would like to do? We would discuss it. She would then have some idea. These were women who were abused wives, who mainly they were marital, whose husbands had abandoned them, was an alcoholic, had another woman, and they mostly had children. And I then realized that my life was so good, I had so many options, there was nothing that I should be unhappy about, because these women were really in very difficult situations. They stayed in these marriages because often they thought, I just want the best life for my kids. And if I leave now, where are we going to live? And you know, the whole HDB situation is such that you have to be an intact family, otherwise it's really difficult to get a flat. That was the situation then. That is a policy that we have that the organization that I work for, AWARE, has fought against. We have made some headway. But in those days, it was quite terrible. So that's how I feel that, my activism work and my work to support more vulnerable, more marginalized people and communities has made me a better and so much happier person, right? So I did this for many years, this legal counseling once a month, and now it became twice a month, with AWARE and the Singapore Association of Women Lawyers. And then I had the chance, because one of the types of cases that were coming to me were family violence cases. And in those days, the law was such that if the police went into a flat and they saw people bruised, they had been fighting, people in different corners, they would say, oh, okay, do you have broken bones? No broken bones. All right, so the fight has stopped, we're leaving. And they would just walk out. It didn't matter unless there were broken bones, an eye, a ear, a limb hanging out. The police had no power to arrest or to do anything more. They would have to walk out. So in those cases, the law was an ass, and there was nothing, and we could tell the woman, the next time it happens, just call the police. And in my heart, I knew, you call the police, and so what? They had limited powers. We needed to change the law. And my colleague at AWARE, Dr. Kanwaljit Soin, who's one of my mentors, was a nominated MP, one of the first women in Parliament, nominated MP, and she said, can we draft a domestic Family Violence Act bill? And I said, I've never done this before. This is usually done by the Attorney General's chambers, but why not? Let's try. And so we did, right? 3 lawyers and Kani Soin, we drafted, she presented it in Parliament, 1995, thereabouts. The government, unhappy with a private member bringing a bill, because quite unheard of, threw the bill out. But there was so much public awareness that had been created by this act of, trying to push this bill through, that the government changed the Women's Charter, and they adopted many of the provisions that we had in our bill. We don't get the credit, but it doesn't matter. We did it. We made a difference. And now all the women and men, children, henceforth will have more protection, because now there is a personal protection order that you can get. You do not need broken bones or eye, ear, limb hanging out in order to get protection, in order to get the police to step in to protect you, right? So that was my first foray into activism, advocacy, not just at an individual level, but at the legal level, right? And that made me feel like, yeah, I can do all these individual cases, and it still gives me a lot of satisfaction. But what we need to do is to work at the policy level, right? So anyway, that was how I got my Fulbright scholarship, because of the work there. And then I came back. It was .com days. I went to New York. I did do a master's in, it was a public administration master's. I came back and I started at .com. I didn't do any social work. So I'm like, because I was very, very caught up with what was happening in New York, and everyone had a .com idea, and it looked like anyone could start like an IT business, so I did. And together with my twin sister, we started Busybody Technology. Now, this was actually, you know what, you never know. I felt like my whole journey into activism was firstly quite accidental. I had no idea that I wanted to be an activist. I just sort of stumbled into it. Then with the .com, I now had a team of people. I had 12. I raised, together with my sister and my friends who started the .com, $1 million. So I learned how to do fundraising. I ran a team of 12 people, including some technologists, and I'm not an IT person at all, but now we had a team, so I learned how to run a team. And so that experience was quite useful for my later experience of actually raising money and running a nonprofit and growing a nonprofit. I was quite happy doing my own thing, and I did actually go back to practice because I got quite burnt out doing my business. And then something happened. All this time, I was still a member of AWARE, right? Maybe we can go to the next, oh no, just hang on to the slide. So AWARE is an organization that fights for women's rights, and like we have services, so I was doing the legal clinic. And in 2009, one of the things that we were doing was we were teaching sex ed in schools. We felt that women, girls, needed to be empowered to actually negotiate the sexual situations that they found themselves in. So we were teaching that, and a group of people, they were religiously motivated, did not like our sex ed program. They felt it was too progressive, and it was not in line with Singapore's values because we did not take a negative stand against homosexuality. We are a feminist group, and we would never take a negative stand to homosexuality. So we said homosexuality is a fact of life. There are people who are homosexuals, and we should not discriminate against them, and we should make sure that they are also educated with sex ed. That group took over the organization in 2009. They literally came in at an annual general meeting, put their people on the board, and took over the organization, AWARE. And at this point in time, I was still, I think at that point I was a lawyer. I heard about this and was very, very shocked, and came back, and I thought, okay, it's important to fight when someone's come in and actually stolen all your things, right? They had taken over the center, the money, everything. We lost the center. We didn't know who these people were. We didn't know why they came in, but later on, this became big news, and everyone in Singapore started to know, like, oh, this group is religiously motivated, did not like our sex ed program, took over the organization. Anyway, that brought me back to AWARE in an intensive way. We read the Constitution, we fought back for the organization in a legal way. We had an extraordinary general meeting that lasted 9 hours. We had the membership of AWARE rose from 250 to 3,000 people, and we won the organization back. We passed a vote of no confidence in that group. So that's how I came back to AWARE. I then decided I did owe AWARE a debt. I did get my Fulbright scholarship. This was the time now to give back. So we needed an executive director after it was called the AWARE saga after this crisis, when we won the organization back, and I said, I will do my best to make sure that this never ever happens again. And when we came so close to losing something that was so precious because of the values it stood for, because of the services it provided to Singapore and Singapore women, we now knew the value of this organization and how dear it was. So I gave up my legal job, took a big pay cut, and became the first executive director of AWARE. So this is 2010, and that's 13 years ago. I was employee number 6. Today we have 30 plus employees, right? We've grown. We started the first sexual assault care center in 2011, and that has become our fastest growing work ever. It's sad, but that's not abating anytime soon. We actually see that it's probably getting worse because of technology. So that's how I became the professional activist that I am today. I never planned any of this. And you know, if there are youth here, students wondering, what shall I do with my life, right? You don't have to worry too much about it, because what you need to do is, at every step of the way where you just need to make a decision, just make the best possible decision for yourself. You don't have to worry too much about where it's going to lead, because it will lead somewhere, and if you're following your inner wisdom, you will get to the place where you need to be. That's what I believe, that is what I've seen a lot of, and that is what has been my experience. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so AWARE, and what does it do, and how does it work? How does AWARE, it's not so easy to do activism in Singapore. One, the government is very effective. You see very strong civil society where the government is not so effective, right? But it's still not, it was never really, it was still quite a patriarchal government, right? It has done many things for women. In particular, it gave women, girls, equal education. From the time that the government started in the 1960s, it was equal education. Because people are its only resource, and they said we have to educate everyone. So, and once you educate women, it just sort of, a lot of things organically, right, improve in terms of women's life. They are empowered. They now have a lot of choices, a lot more choices than they used to have. Not full choice, but a lot more than if they didn't have education, right? So, but there are still many areas of work, a lot of work still to be done. So we work at the individual level. So that's where we have our women's helpline, we have the legal clinic, the counseling, and the sexual assault care center. We do research and advocacy. It means, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically we are trying to change certain policies and laws. We do it by getting evidence that what we have now doesn't work so well. And there's training and education, so I'm here speaking to you guys. We do this in companies. We have a corporate arm that is just training companies on how to deal with workplace harassment, how to make their companies more diverse and inclusive. And in Singapore, we have only achieved gender equality in one place, one domain, and that's education. There are more women than men, and has been for the last more than 10 years, graduating from universities in Singapore, right? Something to be, you have to think about what might be the long-term implications. But whatever it is, when women get out of universities, they realize, oh, it's still not equal, is it? When we go to the workplaces that we find ourselves in, it's still men dominating, generally speaking, right? And there is something about the culture and about the status quo that is much more difficult to change. So in terms of power, decision-making power, both in the public sphere, even in the private sphere, there are still people who will say, yes, the man is the head of the household, right? Privately in our home. There's still a lot of violence. And so there's still a lot of work to be done. Next slide, please. I'll play this video, okay, 5 minutes, and so that we can understand what research and advocacy is and how we do it.
Advocacy and services. AWARE does both. You might be wondering, what's the difference? You're walking by a river. You spot a baby floating in the water. You jump in and pull it to safety. Then you see another baby and another. People rush to help. They fish the babies out, dry them, nurse them. But babies keep coming down the river. Soon the whole town gets involved. Someone builds an orphanage. One by one the babies get adopted, but more keep coming down the river. One day you say, that's it. I'm going upstream to see who is putting all these babies into the river. That's when advocacy begins. The issues AWARE tackles aren't exactly floating babies, but like babies, they grow, carrying pain and trauma with them. Like when abusers could stalk and harass women with no real consequences, or when husbands assaulted their wives and the police were powerless to step in unless the wife had broken bones, or when single parents and their children are denied housing. Someone calls Aware's helpline. She says, "Hey, this is happening to me and I need help." You listen and you give support to her and to the many other callers. You start to see that their stories do not exist in isolation. Something in the system keeps causing women to be vulnerable. So you head upstream. You consult with experts, study other countries, conduct surveys. You search for a way to the heart of the issue. You compile your findings, you come up with possible solutions. Now you must share these with decision makers and with the public. This part used to be painstakingly slow. Putting up posters, sending out bags of letters, holding talks in libraries, and always hoping to be heard. Today you can talk to many people all at once. You can get thousands to sign petitions or to rally in parks. But the challenge remains the same, to let them see the problem you've seen and make them realize you can and you should do something about it. There will be those who try to shut the message down, who say, "Singapore isn't ready for that," or "Oops, I misplaced your report," or "The people you want to help are the problem." Or they might attack you personally, call you awful names, or say, "No national service, no equal rights." You can't let those people scare you. It might take 3 months or 10 years, but if your message rings true, and you have the stamina, the determination to go the distance, then advocacy becomes change. Like when personal protection orders were expanded to enable families to defend themselves against their abusers, or when the Protection from Harassment Act was passed and finally gave victims relief from harassment, or this year, when immunity for marital rape was repealed and husbands could be held responsible for violating their wives. Some of those problems stood for so long, things grew on them like mold, entire ways of thinking and being. We still have these tradition-encrusted problems. Like the new national policy that women should pay more premiums than men for long-term disability insurance. Like how women are still asked what they were wearing when they were sexually assaulted. Like the lack of financial support for caregivers who give up their jobs to support their elderly parents. We can go on and on. So many babies streaming down our river. Together with our wonderful allies, Aware keeps going upstream, not just solving problems but preventing them. Because when advocacy succeeds, the world transforms for the better. But advocacy is not for the faint of heart. It takes hard work and courage and a lot of heroes. So be our heroes. Give us courage. We can't change this country without you. Let's make the future happen now. The funds raised will go to Aware's essential work that wins hearts, changes minds, and improves many lives. Let's do this together.
Thanks, Sean. Oh. Next slide. So that's Aware's work. That's the work that I've been solidly doing 100% of my time for the last 13 years. The research comes in all forms, and we have a team that does it. We write articles as well. We write op-eds. We do a lot of posts on social media. All the time we're publishing, right? So that's work that you need to do to convince people. You need the evidence. You need to be able to present it as well. Next slide, please. And it's really important in Singapore, maybe more so than in other countries, that we work at as many levels as possible. The individual level, the community level, and then the national legal policy level, right? And I say it's more important because in Singapore, it's true we have a very effective government. It's also true that there's not that much space for activism. And if you don't do services together with your advocacy, it's really hard to survive, right? You need to actually provide the services. So the individual level is important. Plus, it gives you the data. It tells you what is happening on the ground. Why are women calling us on the helpline? What are they calling about? And you can see the trends, right? So that has been sort of the secret formula, the secret sauce for Aware's work, that we work at different levels. And they all support each other, right? Individual, the community, because you need to win hearts, and then the government needs to see, actually this is what the people want, and there's the evidence to back it, because there's some research. We'll start looking into these things. Next slide. Just an example, how long does it take to make change in Singapore? It used to take at least 10 years. With the internet, it's become a little faster. Now it's average 5 years for major change, 5 to 10 years. This is an example of the work that we did on workplace harassment. In 2008, there was no law. There's a small law in the Miscellaneous Offences Act. You cannot get a more insignificant sort of sounding legal provision than something in the Miscellaneous Offences Act. So we did 2 research pieces, one to show workplace harassment is quite prevalent in Singapore, and 2, when people actually they experienced this, they had nowhere to go to that actually could help them. No one wanted to go to the police, even though there was that law actually gave them some rights to go to the police. But if you are working in an office, you know that the last thing you want is to actually make this a police case. You might not even make this a labor case. You just want it to stop. And can it stop without getting everyone involved? So, and then we set up the Sexual Assault Care Center. Then we got more cases, right? And we couldn't change. We were still, when we do a piece of research, we will ask to also meet with minister, senior civil servant, etc., to say, these are our findings, there is a serious problem, please pay attention to this, these are our suggested recommendations, this is what Singapore needs. We was doing that, but it looked like it was not going to come, so we started to train companies. That's when we started a unit to just train HR managers and staff on what workplace harassment is, and because HR could do something about it. If the police were not going to do something about it, of course companies would do something about it internally. We launched more reports, more campaigns, and you see that in 2014 we did get a change in law. In 2014 we also got a new policy for companies to make them actually, so that they had to take action against workplace harassment. Some cases that we supported, like the Monica Bay case, you might remember, NUS had a major case. It exposed the areas where they were not so strong in terms of managing these cases. We supported Monica through her case. So, individual as well as with the community and at the legal level, that's the secret formula, right? Okay, next slide. So 10 years, for these things to happen, at least. There's so many issues, we have to pick some areas that we think are the most important, the ones where we feel we really, really need to change. And every 5 years, we look at the windows in this house. So it's still violence, the workplace, aging and caregiving, and lower income women. Next slide. And we will take specific things in each of these windows. I looked at your mission and I thought, wow, what a wonderful set of values, which I feel really you're trained to be. If you have these values, you make a good activist. You need the commitment, because legal change takes a long time, which is why we say, play the long game, keep calm and play the long game, just keep going. You have to do this for many years, don't expect change to happen in the next year. Right? You need compassion to feel, to care about this problem, because it's to speak to you like this, I need to care about this deeply, right, to be effective. And I need to I'll be speaking to a survivor, a victim, and they need to feel that you care. All the other values are really important in any social justice work, especially trust. Nick talked about, getting people to trust and to work with you, that is so key, right? We can have different views, but we respect each other, and I will always assume good intent, unless proven otherwise. Because only if you assume that, then you can actually see that in the next person and in the world. So I think the Sustainable Development mission that you have, these are the 5 goals I picked out that are also AWARE's goals. Next slide. And that's like the end of the presentation. There are ways, you know, we are neighbors. We are at 5 Dover Crescent, neighbor at least with this campus. We don't do enough together. We really should. We were just looking for some possibilities outside. Next slide, please. There are workshops that we do, and you can join any of those workshops. But also, you can join as a student member. You can be an intern with us. And I know someone has already written to me on LinkedIn, one of your students, and said, hey, we're doing this project. I know you're coming to the school. Can we work with you? I would love to. Any other projects, either to advise or to actually see whether we can collaborate with you. Right? So we do collaborate with students from other campuses, and we can explore. All right, thank you very much. I now have these wonderful students who are activists. I'm not sure whether you identify as such, but I think of you as such because you are trying to make change in your own way.
Thank you so much for this presentation, Ms. Lim.
Corinna.
You want? Okay,
Yes, please.
Corinna, thank you so much.
Yes.
I extend my sincere gratitude for this presentation. It's really interesting to hear about the difficulties of presenting sexual education, LGBTQ+ rights, and new ideas on combating sexual assault in the community in Singapore, and honestly just being able to apply that around the world too. And AWARE and the alignment with UWC was really interesting. Fedora, Kai, and I were eager to delve deeper into topics of how you work in the community of Singapore, and your presentation provided us with such. However, I want to ask my first question, which is, how do you effectively and respectfully navigate the balance between critically analyzing the position of the Singapore government and engaging with the established position of the government by facilitating your change?
No contradiction there. It's you have to do both. You have to critically analyze. You have to also, I think we're quite close to the community in many ways because we have these services. So particularly in those areas where people are calling us about it, I would say we have a really good view about it, and we are able to lend insights into the problems that people call us about. It is really important to engage more rather than less with people who don't agree with you, even though it sometimes feels like you don't want to engage with them. And it is, so to be sort of humble, right? You know that you have a position which is important and you really believe in it, but to understand that the other person has their own perspective. The government's not just looking, for example, if I just say government, they're not just not looking at gender equality alone. We are. This is the most important thing for us. They have many other considerations, and one needs to be able to understand where the opportunities are, where the constraints are, and to work within those. You have to, some groups can work not so much within the system, but we are quite an established group, and we have, a charity status, an Institute of Public Character status. So we work very much within the system, but within that, and we're sort of on the boundary, right? We are an advocacy group. There are very few advocacy groups in Singapore. So that's firstly a fact. There are very few advocacy groups in Singapore. So when you're doing advocacy, you're already sort of on the edge. And you need to be there in order to have some independence, but you have to keep engaging with the system, right? So I don't really think of myself as making change within the system, because if it's that, then I'll be within the government. But I am a part of the system. And so, yeah, it's important to have these conversations and so one-on-one with civil servants, with ministers. We have a report. We will always send it to the government first before we release it to the public, and we say, here's our report, give us your comments. They always go through, sometimes very, very minutely, use like, oh, spend another few weeks just looking at their comments. If we don't agree, we can say the government has replied in this way and said that this is their view. Where we are wrong, we make the change. So it's important to build trust in that way. We know people don't like to be surprised, like they read something and like, oh my God, now we have to respond, right? It's better that they have a heads up. It's coming, and you had a chance, you had the first dips to respond. So there's sort of ways of doing it, I guess, yeah, so that everyone feels safe engaging. And also, I think you really have to assume good intent. No one is trying to in bad faith, embarrass anyone, right? Show someone to be wrong and to be stupid. Everyone has a good reason for the views. So always assume that, and that no one's trying to like just make you look bad. Yeah.
Thank you again, Corinna. I'd like to go back to something you mentioned during your presentation. You had that diagram of a house.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how in the windows you have those different areas of focus and how you review them, you said every 5 years. I'm curious as to how you make those decisions. How do you choose what goes in the windows for these 5 years? And how do you justify that in terms of when you are taking a controversial position, as Denai said, how do you justify that that's going to be the topic you want to focus on?
Yeah, okay. So as to firstly, the windows are quite broad, right? We say like marginalized women, like which groups, right? So we will get a sense because one, we have the helpline, but actually for marginalized communities, for example, low-income women don't call the helpline. They might need emotional support. The helpline is for emotional support. But most low-income women will put their own well-being last. So they don't call the helpline for support. They will call other helplines for money, for material support. But for those, we will work with partners. So we know, for example, that a group that we call transnational spouses, and these are women from around Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, China, that are married to low-income men in Singapore. And that when they come in, because everyone is low-income, that these women are not given permanent passes. They don't have PR. They're sometimes on social visit pass. And that their passes are dependent on their husbands renewing it. So we have seen husbands just like not renewing, and the child is Singaporean, and the children sometimes live in Singapore, and mom has to go back. There's not even a divorce. She just can't come in. And these are very difficult situations. And we know this because we work with partners who work with lower income, right? And sometimes, then how do we get to meet with these women? We have to work with the partners and say, can we interview? And we have to find people to interview. So those are the cases that we don't directly deal with, right? So, whether it's through our partners, whether it's coming in through our helplines, and we read everything, right? Anything that is research on gender equality, Singapore women, we read everything. And And then we have to narrow down, okay, which group and what is the research question and what is the issue that we're looking at. And it is through this process, and we are guided by our feminist values of, we understand power dynamics, right? Feminism is really about understanding power, who has power, how women sometimes might not say anything, might seem to have consented because they don't have the power. So understanding all of this, our intersectional lens, where we have to look at not just someone's gender, but also the sexuality, the race, and how all of these work together to actually create a disadvantage that is bigger than the sum of its parts, that is different than the sum of its parts. So all of this, lots of reading, lots of also reading what is happening in outside Singapore, right? And because we're a small group, it's true. I mean, we really have to pick. We can do 1 or 2 research projects a year. We have to make sure that we are asking that one question. It can take 6 months to decide what we are going to do in terms of our research. And we'll do a lot of mini research, and this is where interns come in, like, okay, what is the literature on this, right? What are the stats that we now have on this? And then we just go. Once we decide, we are fully committed to that. At any one time, we have many pots boiling, because in Singapore, you have to see where it's a small country, and when governments, you can see, okay, the signs, they're always reading the tea leaves, okay, it's sort of like they're saying this, it's probably they're going to be working on this in 6 months' time, we think that there might be a new legislation that they're thinking about, etc. So keep your ears really close to the ground, speak to as many people as possible, know where the energy is in the system, and make sure that that pot there, you have it on full flame, if that's where the energy is, right? Yeah.
So following up on that, I was reading on how the Ministry of Education's sexuality education curriculum has either ignored or contextualized homosexuality as a crime. And I heard that Aware was banned as a approved sex ed vendor.
Yep.
So what do you think, as education, as one of the strong missions of Aware, do you plan on focusing on that, or are there any plans at all?
So just in terms of, so two things there. 1, sex ed. 2, LGBT in sex ed, and LGBT in general. Sex ed in Singapore is quite dismal. And Aware does do grade 9 sex ed in this campus. We have been your teachers for grade 9 for more than 10 years. We love working with the school because the school has a very brave stand. It's like, this is the right thing to teach. Because there are conservative parents who are like, why are you talking to people about condoms, right? We're like, we have to educate people about condoms. We can't just say, don't do it, because the more you say to kids don't do it, the more that they want to try to do it. So we understand this, and I think actually schools do, but they find it really difficult to deal with parents that don't, and would prefer to think that their kids are not going to have sex until they get married, which is really unrealistic. So that is one battle we haven't won yet, sex ed in Singapore schools. It has become better, but by all accounts, from all the kids that come out from schools, it's really still very dismal. LGBT has moved a lot since we were taken over in 2009. The fact that 3778 is repealed is amazing. Our friends in the LGBTQ plus groups did not think that they would see it in their lifetime. As activists, full-time, and they're not, because the LGBT groups are all mostly voluntary groups. I believe that things would change. And I said 5-10 years. So it was a little earlier than what I thought, but it did change. And that's what gives us all hope, that as we do this work, if you have the patience and you understand the time frames, you'll see change. And you'll see that the next generation, that's you, that you want something and now you are leading the change, right? I find in some areas, climate change, trans rights, LGBT, you're leading the change, right? And that's the most hopeful thing, that the next generation, because it's now a whole new cohort, right? And you need numbers. And I don't know, I think the internet with its, with all its ills, it also has really positive things to it, right? Yeah, and we've become much more progressive, much faster than we used to progress. Yeah.
You mentioned there the repeal of 377A and how you made a prediction of that. So maybe given your ability for foresight, we can ask where you see the future of LGBT rights in Singapore, and maybe over the next 20 or 50 years, how much you think that will progress? Yeah,
I think there are still, I think the sort of obvious things where like negative portrayals of gay, lesbian people, and that they have to be negative in the media. I think things like that will change quite soon. The Workplace Discrimination Act, it's called the Workplace Fairness Act, which now does not include discrimination on the basis of sexuality. That's what the government has said. The first version will not. I think the next version will, and that will be maybe 5 years' time. Where I think it's much harder would be gay marriage. I think that probably that will change, but it will be civil unions, right? That way you can say, look, we're not taking away anyone's rights, and we're just making sure that everyone has full lives. We can't exclude people. And so I think that is a much easier solution for government. And the government did a fantastic consulting with all the groups. Like, it was really difficult. There was a time in 2008 when it had a chance to change the penal code to get rid of 377A. That was the time they should have done it. But once we had, this in the world, these culture wars, then it became really, really difficult. And so then it became, we won't take it away, but we won't enforce it. Then it was like, as a lawyer, so terrible, such a terrible legal position, right? But they lived with it for some time, and then after that, they're like, okay, once and for all, we have to get rid of this. And then, quite difficult, but they managed to. And so, yeah, I think that will change, because that's how the world's going. Yeah, so I think time is on the side of progressives for this particular issue. Not the case for every issue, but I think this one, time is on our side. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's time for us to broaden the conversation to include our audience. There will be a mic passed around, and you can ask questions you would like to Corinna.
I'm glad I wore my flat shoes.
Thank you. Thank you for this amazing presentation. I just wanted to ask, so you sounded pretty optimistic about LGBT rights in Singapore. So I was wondering if there's any issues you're more sort of pessimistic about in the local Singaporean context.
I am. In the local Singaporean context, generally I think that things are moving, especially in terms of welfare. I think that there is a lot more support and there's a lot more concern about inequality. So all the things to do with inequality, I'm quite optimistic about as well. Aging, which you saw as one of the areas, and Singapore is fastest aging country or second fastest aging country in the world. And this is very, very significant. France is way older, Japan is way older, but they got there over hundreds of years. We are getting there like this. We have very little time to make our infrastructure work for an aging society. Post-COVID, the government, you can see, really ramping up But I think there will be some pain. And with women, one, less money. Many women don't work fully. So when they are older, they have less money. They marry men that are older. How many of you married men that are older? How many of your parents married men that are older? Or your mothers? And that means that dad's going to go first, and mom will be left. And when dad gets sick first, sometimes the family money is actually used up for dad's sickness, and there's not so much left for mom. Women live longer. They tend to be more of the caregivers, etc. Right? So this has a big impact, and we are worried. And it's to do with health infrastructure and elder care. So you have to, we did some research on this, and many women at 40, 50 are giving up their jobs when their parents have what they call 2 ADLs, active, what is it now, ADL. They have 2 things that they can't do, eat or sleep or get up from bed on their own, right? Activities of daily living, ADLs, right? And people give up jobs. And that means that the person at 40 or 50 is giving up the job, and they're going to possibly age into poverty. So aging is a big concern because of the demographics and because of the speed of aging. The one that I feel like, gosh, what are we going to do about this is actually sexual violence. And I'm like, I don't know. We've been working on this for 13 years, like very focusedly. And it's not getting better. I'm very glad #MeToo happened. When #MeToo happened, the Aware Sexual Assault Care Center, I can tell you exactly when it happened, October 2017, because our numbers in October 2017 went up by 79%. 79% more reports, more cries for help. And it was not a spike. It has been up from that. It was a new norm, and it's still going up. And if we had more lines open, it would be even higher. So sexual assault is a big issue. Yeah. Violence is a big issue. I worry about what happens when men don't get the jobs that they want, and they see, oh, how come women are my bosses? Because remember, women are doing better in universities. And so you have incels, you have men's rights groups, so you could have backlash, and we worry about that. We haven't seen it so much in Singapore, but that is a possible threat.
If the laws in Singapore change in terms of protesting, it becomes more available, do you think there'll be more of a time and place for more controversial acts of protest? Because you speak a lot about working passively with the government, but do you think maybe there'll be a point where it's worth openly going against it?
Openly going against?
In the government, yeah.
Openly going against the government. We often disagree quite publicly with government things. How you do it, and how you do it effectively, strategically, is important. We're used to working in a certain way in Singapore, so we don't have street protests. You have Hong Lim Park, very managed protests. I think that the thing that I wish that really was changed was a freer press, because I think that that's where that control is not healthy for society. And when you have clampdowns on freer press and media, I think that is a problem. The protesting, I've just sort of learned to live without that ability to protest in public. I don't know, because there's a certain culture of accepting this way of disagreement, which is no public protest. I don't know whether we need it in order for change to happen. Yeah. But I think more importantly, can we say things on the internet and in the media without repercussions, right? I think that is very important. I think there are some repercussions sometimes, and that's something that I wish was not the case. The repercussions may not be so obvious. It may come in a different way, but yeah.
So just to bring the conversation back to UWC as an entity, so what do you think should be the responsibility of international students to manage more like a Singapore-based issue around women and achieving equality? Because firstly, the paradigms can be different in Singapore and the places that we come from, but also the mechanisms for change are different. So how do you think that we can be of more effect in this?
UWC students?
International students in general, maybe.
Are there any restrictions on you now?
There are still a lot of rule, in the school we have awareness raising and advocacy programs in our services, but there are still a lot of restrictions from the systems the government implements that we have to follow.
Yeah, I'm not sure what specific rules there are. I also think that there is self-censorship, where you are careful because you are at international, you're here, and actually your past says that you're not supposed to get involved in politics, all of that. So it could be those types of things, right? We have fairly broad rules. I mean, if you are thinking of those. There are issues and there are issues. I think there are things that are more sensitive and there are things that are less sensitive. Women's rights, generally speaking, have not been as sensitive. LGBTQ plus rights are still quite sensitive, right? Death penalty is very sensitive. So it depends on the issue. I think there might be some constraints. It may be a very specific rule, or it just might be, that there is a general rule that could be used if if the powers that we feel like maybe you've crossed the line, right? But yeah, I can understand why you think that there might be some constraints. Yeah, I'm not sure whether, certainly as aware, like I said, we are your neighbors. We would welcome your working with us on any projects. I don't think that would be a problem. Yeah. I think none of the projects that we do would be problematic.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about, I just read the statistics on the slides somewhere that women have to pay slightly more for general disability insurance. Can you elaborate more on this issue? Because
Yeah.
I just wanted to know is there anything we can do about it, or
Yeah.
how serious the issue is?
It's quite serious. We're very, very disappointed. What is I don't know, Sugi, if you can remember the name of the insurance. This is the insurance that they rolled out, and it's about if you have it's like insurance against disability when you are old, and it was more expensive for women because women live longer. And we're like, wow, if you're going to calculate insurance, social insurance, like it was just private insurance, that doesn't make sense, right? And it was a recent policy. I'm like, maybe if 20 years ago, when there were like hardly any women in Parliament, you could understand this, but like now, it was very, very, very disappointing. I don't know whether we made a lot of noise when it came out, and they just kept saying, oh, it's like normal insurance principles because women live longer. But like, this is social insurance. And many countries have not adopted the private insurance principles, right? Yeah, I mean, they should take into account that women have less money. And, you know, yeah, it's, they're taking care of everyone else, right? There's so many reasons why it should just be equal. Yeah. Or less, exactly. So anyway, is there a way? I think that one has a lot of logic, you know, that you can use to argue against it, right? Unfortunately, I didn't see that the public was so up in arms, and yeah, so we did make a lot of noise, but it just sort of died down after a while, and we moved on to other things. Yeah, but maybe like the next time it comes up again for review, that's one of the things that we should review.
I was just wondering, how would you say financial literacy and women who are more financially independent, do you think it would help a lot with like the situations that you gave? And how would that help them, you know, like maybe be able to support themselves more?
Hello, my neighbors at home. Financial literacy is really important. And yes, I think that would make quite a lot of difference. We did do financial literacy at one point. Then, yeah, it would go a long way. It's not something that we felt like we were in the best position to do, so we gave it up because it was like hard to get people to come to aware. It's not like we have a reputation for doing this. But certainly, I think there is room for more financial literacy to be done, and it is important. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Corinna. Thank you. I was wondering how our UWC community at large, like the parents, teachers, and students, just more generally, could support AWARE. Like, how could we support you?
Why don't you say how you support AWARE first? Josie is a member and a very kind supporter.
I have been a member since I arrived in Singapore, so about 11 years. I've also been on the helpline for a number of years and was really, really grateful for the training. So AWARE doesn't just put anyone on the helpline. They do an incredible amount of training for the volunteers, who are all women. And I think it was 6 months of training. And then you're on the helpline every week. And it was just, you know, you asked about how we as expats and international students can get involved here in Singapore. I think that experience of answering helpline calls, you know, weekly from women in distress across Singapore was, you know, an incredible privilege. It was hard and challenging and quite distressing at times, but it was a real privilege to be involved here in Singapore. I have, I think, done a little bit of work with Catalyse. So for professionals here today, I think there are ways for you to get involved with Catalyse on a voluntary basis. I think, are you still doing that?
Not on a voluntary basis. Catalyse is going to be spinning off as a separate business. What we would love, because we go into companies to train on diversity and inclusion and how to manage workplace harassment and how to prevent workplace harassment. If you can bring us into your companies, it would be great for your companies, as well as it's a revenue generator for us, right? And we're trying to spread this education as far as and wide as possible. So that's one way. If you are a trainer yourself, we could collaborate on certain areas as well. Yeah.
And then just from a fundraising perspective, the annual ball is something that Aware raises a lot of their money from, and so if you're interested in attending or getting a table, I know they're very grateful for that. Have I forgotten anything, Corinna?
No, you've done a wonderful job. Thank you. Yeah, Josie's a great member and supporter. The helpline training, we're starting again. We stopped it after COVID. So we are now getting a batch of new volunteers. We do this training once a year. It is a very, very good training. I think that international parents might be a good volunteers, because this is 10 to 6. It is working hours. If you can spare some time, you know, the experience is really a very good one. The training is during working hours as well. So that's the part that might be a little bit more tricky. But once you've been trained, it's, I think it's 4 hours per month of volunteering work, right? So not so bad, but the training time is quite intense. Yeah. You can try? Yeah, just.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your time with us this evening.
Welcome.
I'm curious, one of the slides you had, the one that actually was a bit depressing because it showed just the one bit of equality that we've kind of sorted out over in Singapore.
Yeah.
At the center of that was norms.
Yes.
And I'm fascinated. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about the nature of normative change within Singapore. How much of that is driven by factors within Singapore, and how much of that is actually coming from outside as part of broader global currents?
Okay, so the gender equality flower is a slide that I often use. Norms is at the heart of gender equality, right? The stereotypes that we have, the expectations of the roles that women should play and that men should play, etc. So how much of it is coming from, it's hard to say. I mean, I feel like Netflix has changed a lot of our norms, right? That's pretty coming from outside, but really coming right into the heart of our living rooms and our families and all of that. So, you know, just that alone, I feel has been like very powerful, right? I'm not sure what other sort of influences, but if you're just talking about like lay persons, of course, we do work at the catalyzed training. Most of our clients, MNCs. But who works in MNCs? Lots of local people too. And I found that the LGBT movement, it really was very active in the MNCs. And that's to a point where the government said, oh, you have to, like, you know, not be so active, right? And they started to get a bit worried. So that's why, you know, in some of the work that we do, gender equality, I'm like, gosh, there are so many women in these international companies who expect more from the companies, who have women's groups who are like, what can we do to have more equality? And companies really take them seriously. And that's why we started to actually invest more, because like, wow, this is, that it's quite, there's a lot of room here. The ground is quite soft for planting more seeds of gender equality and getting paid for it as well, right? So we do when we, you know, diversity and inclusion work, not just women, but they will do LGBT and, you know, all the intersectionalities. So yes, the companies space through the media, making a big difference. Yeah.
Hey, Corinna, thank you for taking the time to give this talk. Certainly increased my awareness to the equality. And based on this chart, it seems like we are still be the long way to achieve the norm. My daughter is 8.5 years old. I feel like when she grew up into the university and going to work, she will probably still live in a society not equal. So as a father, I want to know what advice you can give to a young girl or woman that currently still studying in the school in terms of what are some key competencies and skills.
What school, your daughter is in the school?
I'm not, my daughter is not in this school yet. We're still waiting for a place. But nonetheless, this is a very useful experience for me. So what are some key competencies and the skills that a young girl should start to acquire? Because building competencies taking very long time, such as we talk about the financial literacy could be a very useful skill for women to acquire. That when they grow up, they are more likely to enjoy an equal life.
Do you have a son as well?
No.
Okay. So, we tell our girls you can do anything, just be anything, we'll support you. We never tell our sons the same. We don't tell our sons, you can be a full-time caregiver. Actually girls, I feel, they are given much more empowering messages and options. And so, in some ways, in terms of girls' development, it is quite good because somehow we've started to think about how can we make sure that our girls have equal opportunities to our men. But where we are stuck a little is that the men aren't changing as fast as the women are, right? So if you think about women in the workplace, tons. If you think about fathers, full-time caregivers, very few. So how can you have that CEO, female, who that job is so big, you need someone to be supporting that person, right? So that's where, so one thing is, they always say, choose the right, if you're heterosexual, choose the right partner, choose the right male partner who is going to be supportive. And I've heard many women leaders say, most important decision that any woman can make is choosing that partner. But it's true. Okay, then in terms of capabilities, I think about my own upbringing, why I am the way I am. I've always been independent. One, I was in a family of 3 girls, and my mother was extremely, very capable, very strong, way more active than my dad. So the role modeling that I had, right? So how are you and your wife? How is your relationship? Your kid is going to follow that very much. You can say whatever, but they're generally going to follow what mom and dad do, what they see mom and dad do, the roles that mom and dad take, and that's what it is generally is the strongest impression that they're going to have, right? So that's one, the family. My school was an all-girls school. I know that this is quite controversial. I really believe in all-girls schools. I don't believe in all-boys schools. This is a problem, because you can't have all girls and not all boys. Because all-girls schools, the girls just do everything, right? There's no idea of, oh, there's a chair here. Boy, can you carry this chair? As a girl cannot do it, right? We just did everything. And our teachers were all like really capable people. With all boys schools, and I hear this from the teachers, is that men and boys need the moderating influence of girls, because otherwise they can act very badly as a pack of boys. So then I don't know how to solve this problem, right? Because we need the girls in the boys' schools, and they can't be in the all-girls school. So I don't really know how to solve this problem. But with the girls, I would say, I was sporty, and that was really important, right? Competitive, and I was outdoors, because that was my love, and I was just given all the opportunities. I was given dance opportunities, piano opportunities. I sucked at all until they put a tennis ball and a tennis racket in my hand, and then I found my niche. So that's what I had. I had like a lot of opportunities. And you would do that for all your kids, right? And if you had a son, you would like, okay, you have to do the chores in the same way that the girl has to do the chores. You have to try to have the same rules for the boys and the girls, right? So that they don't see that, yeah, I'm a girl, so I have these rules, and I'm a boy, I have these set of rules, right? You're welcome. I'm not a parent, but for my 2 cents worth.
I think we're out of time, unfortunately. I think this could go on for a long time. But as we think about the future, if you're sort of in the business of trying to do a little bit to make the world a better place, I think it's easy to be focused on the problems. And being focused on the problems can sometimes be hard work, and retaining the optimism that you need to work with people and to make change for the long term is something that I think is very inspiring to hear about. And I think what's really interesting, listening as an educator, when I think that the value of our work will be in what our children do in decades to come, not necessarily in what happens today and what their children do and so on. I think it's quite inspiring to hear the detail of the attention of what's happening today being informed by the global trends and demographics and the detailed issues around what's the reality of Singapore today. So I think we're all taking away from this just the incredible possibility that's there when you are on top of these details and you understand the big picture and you have an unwavering moral conviction that change over the years may well come and it's worth fighting for. So thank you to Corinna, and thank you to our student panel, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Safe travels home, everybody. Thank you for making it out in the rain. I hope it stopped and you're not waiting hours for a taxi. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Oh, good. I hope you learned something from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow,
Oh.
we could have talked all night.
No.
It looked like you guys wanted to